Hi, everyone. Welcome to WION Live Broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Teherani. First, let's get you up to speed with this hour's headlines. Former U.S. President Donald Trump's control of some of his most prized real estate holdings is in jeopardy as a New York court is set to begin hearings into alleged fraud in his business dealings. Trump is expected to attend the hearing in person. He's termed the judge hearing the case as being deranged. European Union foreign ministers meet in Kyiv, their first ever meeting outside the bloc. The meeting comes as a show of support for Ukraine after anti-Ukraine candidate Robert Fico won the election in Slovakia. And the U.S. Congress omitted funding for Kyiv from a spending bill, at least for now. The Nobel Prize for Medicine has been awarded jointly to Hungarian biochemist Katalin Karikó and American physician Drew Weissman for their work on messenger mRNA technology that led to the rapid creation of the COVID-19 vaccinations. An array of cleanliness programs and other events held across India to mark the 154th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Special prayers held at his memorial in New Delhi as tributes pour in from world leaders. And Simone Biles scripts history on her return to World Gymnastics Championships. The American becomes the first woman to land a Yurchenko double pike vault. So the United States is gearing up to host the APEC Summit in November, and expectations are building that China's Xi would meet with President Biden on the sidelines of APEC after missing a chance for a face-to-face meeting at the G20 in India. But will the Chinese president skip the San Francisco summit, fearing embarrassment on the world stage? Well, earlier, with no official explanation, Xi Jinping did not go to the G20 summit in New Delhi this month. Chinese Premier Li Qiang attended in his place. The decision prompted the United States to say that China was giving up on the G20 and was building an alternative world order. President Xi Jinping is under pressure at home, delivering the National Day speech. He said, and this is a quote, "The road ahead will not be smooth. China's economy is showing signs of weakness. The storm clouds continue to persist, and the data shows missed growth expectations, and consumers remain cautious." As President Xi reasserted his power of the Communist Party within the economy and redirected Chinese business inward. Chinese trade is under threat. China, long described as a workshop of the world, remains highly dependent on exports, vulnerable to changes in this global economy. The threat of recession in the U.S. and Europe, combined with galloping inflation, is weakening international demand for Chinese products. And then there are signs of political turmoil in Beijing. The U.S. government believes China's defense minister Li Shangfu is the subject of an investigation by Beijing and has been relieved of his duties. Earlier, Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang disappeared and was ousted from his post in July. China also replaced the leadership of its rocket force, the army unit that oversees its nuclear arsenal, in July, with its former commander Li Yuchao not seen in public for weeks before the change. The United States and China have one of the world's most important and complex bilateral relationships. That's no secret. Since 1949, the countries have experienced periods of both tension and cooperation over issues including trade, climate change, and of course, Taiwan. Dialogue between Beijing and Washington has been gradually resuming despite tension. Beijing has been critical of Washington's continued attempts to deepen military alliances in the Asia-Pacific region, and has particularly disapproved of bases that the U.S. military is building in the north of the Philippines, facing democratically governed Taiwan. China has long advocated partnerships rather than alliances and is not part of any military bloc. Its sole remaining ally after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 is North Korea, to which China is bound by a 1961 treaty to come to its defense if attacked. All right, for more on this, we are now being joined by foreign policy analyst Edward P. Joseph from Washington, D.C. He is also a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University. Thank you so much for joining us, Edward. You know, China is yet to confirm Xi's presence at the APEC Summit next month. Xi also skipped the G20. So is he staying away from global events due to domestic pressure, in your opinion?
Clearly, something is going on in Beijing that is keeping Xi Jinping away from what he normally would relish, which is an opportunity to shine and demonstrate Chinese leadership on the world stage, such as at the G20, hosted by none other than India, a rival to China. So it's clearly unmistakable that there are concerns that Xi, the way that they are weighing these appearances in Beijing, suggests that there is clear compromise. And we can imagine whatever concerns there were about the G20 in India will be magnified tenfold by an appearance at the APEC Summit in November in the United States, in San Francisco, with President Biden hosting, and of course, all of these APEC members watching, as well as the citizens of the United States watching very closely. So this is a development that not only in Beijing, but in Washington as well, the orchestration of this will be very, very carefully managed, both in the dynamics in the communication in the run-up and in the actual event itself and any meeting between President Biden and President Xi that might take place. Please.
And on Sunday, Xi said that the days ahead are not smooth, as they are full of external and internal challenges. Do you think that this is a reflection of the pressure that's mounting on the Chinese president?
Yes, obviously, he's signaling. Anytime you have a world leader make that kind of a tone, there's going to be pressures on us. He's signaling, he's creating a framework in which there will be understanding for any measures that Xi has to take place. It's in a form of an alibi. He's facing severe economic contraction in China. China has not really come back from the change it made on its very strict zero tolerance for COVID and on opening up the Chinese economy. The Chinese economy did not bounce back the way other economies bounced back, including notably the American economy, following the formal end of the COVID pandemic. And that puts Xi under tremendous pressure at home because, of course, the legitimacy of the PRC, the political party that is running China, in the hands of Xi Jinping, who has centralized power to an unprecedented degree, the legitimacy rests on rising economic growth in China, and that presents a fundamental challenge for President Xi.
Right, and demonstrating that the Chinese model can be successful and whatnot. Edward P. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. We'll be following this story, of course, very closely. It's hard to imagine November is so close.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
So the UK has announced a $4.9 billion deal to build attack submarines. The contract has been signed as part of the AUKUS program with Australia, as well as the United States, to build these submarines. The UK Defence Minister announced that the contracts have been signed with UK's defence giant BAE Systems. The firm has said that the Defense Ministry had awarded it the funding to cover development work until 2028, allowing it to start detailed design work on the submarine. Take a listen.
Our ultimate national insurance policy is, of course, our at-sea nuclear deterrent. So we're building the new Dreadnought-class submarines that will carry Britain's nuclear deterrent into the middle of this century. And today, I can announce that we've signed contracts worth £4 billion with leading British businesses to drive forward the development of the most powerful attack submarines ever operated by the Royal Navy.
The US, Australia, and Britain in March unveiled details of the AUKUS plan to provide Australia with nuclear-powered attack submarines from the early 2030s. This is to help counter China's ambitions in the Indo-Pacific region. Britain, which will also operate the submarines, is pivoting its foreign and defense policy towards the Indo-Pacific. Former President Donald Trump is going to be in New York today as he faces fresh legal troubles as a civil fraud trial against the former president and two of his sons begin here in the city. The case casts threats of fraud on Trump's business empire as he campaigns to retake the White House, with 4 criminal cases looming. In today's case, Trump and his family businesses are facing the trial to determine how much they owe in penalties after the judge found the former U.S. president's assets were inflated by billions of dollars to secure more favorable loan and insurance terms. Moreover, the former president and New York Attorney General Letitia James, who have been for years on a collision course, are set to face each other in the courtroom in Lower Manhattan. Trump has long volleyed insults at James while her office investigated him and his company for widespread fraud. Trump has repeatedly dismissed the New York civil allegations, calling James, quote, a racist, and labeling the judge in the case as being deranged. Trump was not expected to attend the court hearing in person, but on Sunday night, he confirmed that he will appear at the Manhattan court to hear Letitia James set out her case for $250 million in fines for the Trump organization. Trump and his 2 sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, face a permanent ban on running businesses in New York. A 5-year restriction could also be imposed on commercial real estate activities by Trump and his flagship Trump organization. In addition to the civil case, Trump also faces several major criminal proceedings in the months ahead. He's scheduled to appear before a federal judge in Washington on March 4th on charges of trying to overthrow the results of the 2020 presidential election won by Joe Biden. After that, Trump will be back in New York State court, this time on criminal hush money charges, and later in a Florida federal court, where he is accused of mishandling classified documents after leaving office. He will also have to answer to state charges in Georgia, where prosecutors say Trump illegally tried to get the southern state's 2020 election results changed in his favor. On Sunday, top U.S. House Republican Kevin McCarthy said that he expected to survive a threat to his speakership. McCarthy's remarks came after hardline critics within his own party called for his ouster following the passage of a stopgap government funding bill that drew more support from Democrats than Republicans. Hardline Republican Representative Matt Gaetz told multiple U.S. media outlets that he would file a motion to vacate, a call for a vote to remove McCarthy as Speaker of the House of Representatives, which his party controls by a narrow margin. Speaking to CBS, McCarthy said, "I will survive." Former President Donald Trump had encouraged Republicans in Congress to work for a government shutdown unless their budget demands were met. Asked at a campaign stop in Iowa whether he would support a move by Gaetz to strip McCarthy of his speakership, Trump said, "I don't know anything about those efforts, but I like both of them very much." Gaetz is one of a group of about 24 hardlines who forced McCarthy to endure a withering 15 rounds of voting back in January before he was elected speaker. Back then, they squeezed out concessions, including a rule change to allow any one House member to call for a vote to oust the speaker. It was not clear how much support McCarthy would have in such a vote or whether any Democrats would back him. McCarthy agreed Democrats last month launching an impeachment inquiry of President Joe Biden. In an interview on ABC, meanwhile, Matt Gaetz said, and this is a quote, "I'm relentless and I will continue to pursue this objective." McCarthy stunned Washington on Saturday when he backed a bill to fund the government through November 17th, averting a partial shutdown. He did not impose any of the spending cuts or changes to border security that his hardline colleagues had called for. The bill was approved by the Senate on a broad partisan basis and signed into law by President Biden later in the night. It is meant to give lawmakers more time to agree on a deal to fund the government through September 30th of 2024. An ouster of the speaker would complicate the process, of course. Canada's Justin Trudeau is once again crushing free speech in his country. Billionaire Elon Musk called out the Canadian Prime Minister on X, formerly known as Twitter, after Canada made it compulsory for online streaming services to formally register with the government for quote-unquote regulatory controls. Under the new decree, online streaming services that operate in Canada offering broadcast content and earn $10 million or more annually need to register with the government. Ottawa also made it compulsory for certain online streaming services to provide the regulator with information related to their content and subscriptionship. Also, users and individuals who use social media to share podcasts are not registered. They are expected to register as well. Responding to a tweet posted by journalist and author Glenn Greenwald, who was commenting on the ruling, Musk called Trudeau curbing free speech shameful. Meanwhile, journalist Glenn Greenwald says that the Canadian government, armed with one of the most repressive online censorship schemes, is actively trying to censor free speech. Notably, this is not the first time that the Trudeau government has been accused of acting against free speech. Back in February of 2022, Trudeau invoked emergency powers for the first time in the country's history. This was done in order to arm the government with more power to respond to truckers' protests who were opposing the vaccine mandates at that time. Well, this week's largest Middle Eastern energy conference will not be focused on oil. The APEC Summit is an annual meeting of ministers and corporate leaders that has traditionally focused on oil investment, production, and markets. This time, whether it's more likely to be a decisive factor or not is the question, as the slogan of the conference suggests: decarbonizing faster together. It's being held only 2 months before COP28. COP28 is the main climate gathering of the United Nations, which will also be hosted in the United Arab Emirates. As host, UAE must strike a delicate balance between encouraging other countries to adopt ambitious global plans to reduce emissions and pursuing its own ambitious oil expansion. At the summit, such differences are expected to become apparent as OPEC limits supply demand approaches record levels and inflationary fears reverberate around the globe. Crude prices are rising towards $100 per barrel, drawing the attention of thousands of oil delegates. But the oil industry's participation casts a shadow over the whole summit. Russian aggression in Ukraine has increased the demand for fossil fuels and boosted the confidence of those businesses. Despite feeling more at ease than ever discussing the transition, their solutions for lowering emissions do not always include lowering productivity. There are worries that such CEOs may use climate conferences to further their own agenda. In recent months, tensions between businesses and environmental activists have grown as fossil fuel corporations have reduced their goals for renewable and climate and claim to allocate a larger portion of their budget to oil and gas as well. Okay, moving on. Hollywood actor Tom Hanks has warned his fans that an ad for a dental plan that appears to use his image is in fact fake. It's not the real Tom Hanks. And basically it was created, using artificial intelligence. In a message posted on social media, the actor said that his image was used without his permission. Hank wrote, and this is a quote, "Beware. There is a video out there promoting some dental plan with an AI version of me. I have nothing to do with it." End of quote. The Oscar winner has expressed concern in the past about the use of AI in film and TV, although he has not shied away from approving digital altered versions of himself in film. The 2004 computer animated Christmas fantasy, The Polar Express, featuring a CGI version of Hanks, which is something everyone remembers. He was also de-aged in scenes in a 2022 film called A Man Called Otto. All right, let's take you to the world of sports, where Buffalo Bills safety Denny Hamlin took the field in a regular season NFL game for the first time since he suffered a cardiac arrest mid-game last season. He returned to NFL action in his team's game against the Miami Dolphins. And Hamlin, if you remember, he had collapsed on the field on the 2nd of January and was revived by medical staff after suffering a cardiac arrest. After being discharged from hospital on the 11th of January, the 25-year-old was cleared to play again in April and appeared during the Bills' preseason games. But this Sunday, he was able to play in his first competitive game since the incident. Hamlin didn't record any official stats during the game, but his team registered a convincing 48-20 win over the Miami Dolphins. Before the game, Hamlin was the last Bills player out of the tunnel and hurried the length of the field with his arms spread before removing his helmet and standing in front of the home crowd.
Very important. That moment meant everything to me. You know, I think it was more so about proving something to myself than anything else. Just showing myself that I have the courage, I got the strength, I got the pride, you know, everything, all of those words, you know, in me to be able to go through something so traumatic and, you know, be able to come back from it and still, to be able to still do what I love at the highest level in the world is amazing.
Thank you so much for staying with us and watching WION Live Broadcast from New York City. But don't go away. A lot more global news will continue after this break.
He changed cricket forever with an audacious
It's easy to tell you a flat story. It's easy to show you what's happening around the world. We do the difficult part.
This weapon has been banned, but the US, Ukraine and Russia do not find the bombs problematic.
We also tell you why what's happening.
New drug is making a difference